My father was a magician. As far back as I can remember, he performed magic tricks at family gatherings. His sleight of hand maneuvers began in the US Army. An old black and white photo of him wearing fatigues and a broad smile shows him handling a deck of cards that look like a cascading waterfall. But in reality, they are... Yikes! What am I doing? I can't tell you, or I would be violating the magician's credo. If there's one thing I learned from my father, never reveal the secret of the magic. Dad, his friends called him Hank, drove his way up the eastern seaboard from his childhood home in North Carolina and parked in New Jersey, where he met my mom, Vera. She was a secretary at Montgomery Ward's, and one day Hank strolled in to cash a paycheck. My mom once told me, he looked like Clark Gable, and his paycheck had a big amount on it. He worked on the assembly line at Ford Motor Company. They dated briefly, and then he shipped off to war. Hank landed at Omaha Beach, France, on D-Day +6. He cooked for the troops, and 40 years later could still remember what he served his men the day they landed. Turkey. He served turkey sandwiches at lunch and turkey a la king for dinner. He also told me that the government issued him dehydrated eggs that would turn green when scrambled. Some sort of chemical reaction in the pan. That's when Hank befriended his wartime neighbors, France, Holland, Germany, wherever. He'd trade Lucky Strike cigarettes and Hershey bars for fresh eggs. Then I could make cakes, Dad told me. Dehydrated eggs didn't work in cakes. The cakes wouldn't rise. Anyway, somewhere between the turkey and the cakes, Hank performed magic. He married Mom in 46, and soon they had a family of 3 daughters. What does a father do with 3 girls? Why, teach them the art of prestidigitation, of course. Dad taught my 2 older sisters and me magic tricks with names like the little man from outer space, the dove box, and Chinese sticks. My family would bandy these names about in regular conversation. Nancy, the bossy one, would bark, "You do the cake trick, I'll do the Chinese sticks." Bonnie, the funny one, would giggle, "No, I like the dove box, you do the cake trick." Me, the kind one, like a teenage nun, actually, would coo, "I'll do the cake trick." "Somebody iron the silk scarves for the square circle," Nancy would order. "You know how Daddy hates wrinkled scarves." Bonnie, Nancy, and I weren't particularly close, but we did form a triangle. 3 distinct points connected by lines of DNA. Magic was not a passion of mine, not like for Dad. It was simply my family's hobby. Some kids played tennis, others played an instrument. The Cranfords performed magic. We even had stage names: Bondini, Nandini, and Sheldini. After we cleaned house on Saturday mornings, Mom would make us lettuce and tomato sandwiches on toasted white bread, smeared with mayonnaise. In the afternoon, Dad would teach us what he referred to as patter, a kind of continuous, funny explanation to accompany the magic tricks. Learning how to do the actual trick wasn't that difficult. Memorizing the patter was. Dad didn't smile during those training sessions. Magic was serious business. He mostly demanded, "Louder, let him hear you in the back." And practice, practice, practice. Years later, Dad told us, "I thought it would be a good way for you to learn how to speak in front of people." Teaching his daughters life lessons was one of my father's most endearing traits. The Cranford magic words, which summoned the spirits and completed the illusion, were these: hocus pocus, rotten tomatoes, pinto beans, and Irish potatoes. My sisters and I would weave the black magic wand through the air and recite the family slogan with gusto and confidence. The spirits always arrived on cue. When we moved to Denver in 1972, Dad joined the Mile High Magician Society. He and Mom went to a costume party once. He dressed as the magician in a homemade satin cape and top hat. Mom as the ace of diamonds. She looked adorable in her black tights and boots. Bonnie, Nancy, and I all graduated from college and married. Our lives, dominated by careers, homes, and children, left little time for magic. Dad, however, continued to perform. Every Saturday, he'd lunch with his magician buddies at Furr's Cafeteria. When my parents would visit my family and I in San Diego, Dad would perform magic for my children, Dylan and Michelle. They called him Opa, the German word for grandfather. Dad's memories of Germany during the war ran deep. In 2002, my oldest sister Bonnie was diagnosed with breast cancer. We lost her 2 years later. Our family assembled in Houston for her funeral. In his suitcase, Dad had packed one of the magic wands. He carried it with him to the cemetery. Dad, I asked, what's with the magic wand? He explained, when a magician dies, you break their wand. You bury them with it. Oh, I said. After the ceremony, the wand remained clutched in his hand. Go ahead, Dad. He was reticent, an attribute I'd never observed in him. He was always so hard-charging. I watched him struggle to break the wand. After a moment, he placed it atop her casket. The plastic was too tough for him to break. 4 months later, Dad developed pneumonia. The doctors kept him alive long enough for me to fly from San Diego to Denver. Mom, Nancy, and I were at his side when he quietly slipped away. Excuse me. We left the hospital and plowed through the snowy roads to the home where my parents had lived for over 30 years. I sat down at the computer in my parents' office and wrote Dad's obituary. The lead almost wrote itself. For his final magic effect, Hank Cranford, past president of the Mile High Magicians Society, passed to the great beyond. I reflected back to Bonnie's funeral. My dad, the magic wand he'd clutched, what he told me. He'd been showing me exactly what to do, as if Bonnie's funeral was practice for his own. I Googled broken wand ceremony and clicked on the International Brotherhood of Magicians. As I read about the ceremony, tears dripped onto the back of my hand. I phoned Brad, a magician friend of Dad's. He'd performed at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary several years earlier. Brad's a funny guy. You just look at him and laugh. But we didn't laugh when I asked if he'd perform the broken wand ceremony at Dad's funeral. Suddenly, I found myself planning a show of sorts, a very sacred one. I would be speaking in front of people with confidence and ease, just like my dad had taught me. Little did I know these would be the circumstances. That evening, I trudged into the chilly basement in search of Dad's green suitcase of magic. A frayed string hung from the ceiling. I tugged at it, and one stark light bulb illuminated the shadowy space. I opened the suitcase and took a deep, musty breath. Wrinkled scarves, the dollar bill trick, and the cake trick waited for the next show to begin. As I sorted through years of magical trappings, the yellow rubber chicken fell to the bottom. Suddenly, as if levitated from the depths of the satiny suitcase interior, his magic wand materialized. Dad would have been the last one to have touched it. I gripped the sides of the suitcase and leaned my weight onto it. After a moment, I reached for the wand. The black plastic felt cold and smooth in my hand. I pressed it to my heart. Dad's tool bench, a few feet away, is where I found the little hacksaw. The assignment I faced was difficult. Like purposely damaging a precious piece of art, I sawed a tiny, inconspicuous cut. Plastic shavings fell onto the bench, and I held it at eye level and nodded. That should do it. A few days later, the aroma of incense and flowers perfumed the air at the funeral mass at Church of the Risen Christ. I read aloud the only poem Dad ever mentioned entitled Abu Ben Adam. My 17-year-old son, Dylan, delivered a kind and heartfelt eulogy. Tears fell from his blue eyes when he said, "I'll miss you, Opa." At the end of Mass, I introduced Brad to the congregation and invited him up to the lectern. He told those gathered that he knew Hank through the Brotherhood of Magicians and that he had always looked up to him as a mentor. Brad paused, as one might do before a prayer to collect one's thoughts. He raised his arm and displayed Dad's magic wand. Brad said, "The wand in story and symbol is an age-old conjuring representation of mystery. To the uninitiated, it is but a piece of plastic. To Hank, it was a reminder of the joy and pleasure of an entertainment art that has existed since ancient times. This wand was for Hank an historic emblem that linked him with others of like mind and heart in this vast fraternity of magic. Without Hank, the wand is now useless. The magic is never in the wand. It's in the person." Brad looked out at us, then fixed his eyes on the wand. He extended his arm in front of him, turned the magic wand horizontally, and clasped both ends. A crack echoed throughout the church. Brad continued, "The magic that infused itself into the life of performing on this earth is now broken and joined with the magic of the eternal. The magic of earth is over. The magic and mystery of another realm awaits Hank and will soon be revealed." Brad stepped down and approached Mom. Into her hands, he placed the two halves of plastic. She put them in her lap and patted him on the cheek. Family members caravanned to Fort Logan National Cemetery. Cars snaked around the winding road until we came to a small shelter. When I stepped from the car, winter air blew into my face, but the sunshine eased the cold. We sat on metal folding chairs. The priest recited prayers. An American flag was methodically folded and handed to my mother. And then I placed the broken wand atop Dad's casket. Sweet young soldiers played taps.
Shelley DeAngelis, everybody. Let's give it up for her.